Thank you, Abhishek. Happy to be here actually. Uh, Welcome all to the session on leveraging financial data for non-financial use cases. And welcome all the esteemed panelists for the discussion. I'm assured that this will be a very interesting discussion, and the participants will take away a lot of inputs, a lot of inspiration on what to build and how to build. I'll just give your participants a overview of how the format of the discussion will be. We'll start off with the round robin format where each participant will speak for around 7 to 8 minutes, give their insights on how they are building, what they are building, what the value of data they see in product innovation, not just right now, but in the coming future, and how data is very crucial in the coming years in the digital economy. So, and then maybe I'll try to direct few questions towards the panelists from the chat, from the participants. And I also encourage all the panelists to ask each other some questions if they have anything. Let's make it a more dynamic session rather than a more one-on-one session as such. So, okay, I'll not take much of this time. I'll invite Mr. Vinay Pandey to give his insights on how AI ecosystem has been instrumental, or maybe how it can shape the future of welfare scheme delivery.
Good evening and very happy Navratri to all of you and to my fellow panelists as well as the people who have joined. It's an extreme pleasure to be there here and tell you what we are doing in the Ministry of Rural Development, specifically with account aggregator. But before going to that phase, let me explain what we are doing right now under Ministry of Rural Development for National Rural Livelihood Mission. So basically, National Rural Livelihood Mission is catering to removal of poverty from the rural areas across India. So it's a pan-nation program, a flagship program of Government of India. And there are various nodes which we are using for poverty alleviation and promotion of sustainable livelihoods. And that one of those measures are skilling for wages. And another measure which is we are running with a bank that is called Rural Self-Employment Training Agencies. So now these two programs are basically focused on youth, and they make the youth get adequate training as well as make them employable for getting absorbed in the either in the organized sector or they start their own self-enterprises. Now the challenges comes when we deal with data at pan-India level. So if my volume of data is around training around 8 lakh candidates every year and verifying their documents whether they are placed or not. So now question comes that why account aggregator or why any sort of data which we are requiring? As you know, all public funded programs require certain kind of due diligence and certain kind of proof of concept which has been there. So something has been done and that needs to be verified and monitored. Unless you monitor this and verify it, there are chances that there are a lot of bunglings and bunglings can happen over there, and acts of omission and commission could be there. So what we initiated is that in our process, though we start everything from the Aadhaar enabled biometric attendance systems, and these are all Aadhaar verified candidate details, but we face a big challenge when candidates are trained by third-party agencies and then placed in organized sectors across geography. Now, when you are sending somebody to across geography, they are getting paid by different banks. We had around 24 banks which are in the system, which are called public sector banks. And other than that, there are banks which are regional rural banks. Then there are banks which are private entities. And nowadays, payment banks has also chip in. So each and every kind of bank is providing certain kind of avenues to make the payments, salary payments. Now, to verify those documents, our scheme says that we need 3 months account statements, offer letter, and salary slip. Now, these 3 documents are scanned and uploaded on the system. So the load is quite high, and as well as the administrative treasury to get all these documents onboarded on the system also becomes quite huge. What we intend to do with account aggregator and what we had piloted and successfully saw the results, that we need to push only 5 or 6 set of data through account aggregator, which is an RBI mandated platform, through which we will get a true or false, whether that documents are true or false, or whether the data which has been put on the document is true or false. So we had come across, when we put artificial intelligence and machine learning on our databases, we found a lot of documents which were forged, lot of documents which were manipulated, and there was some eligibility issues also. So when we developed this account aggregator framework and the methodology to test our data through account aggregator, we got exceptional results and with very least cost. So right now, if I say my per beneficiary cost of verification only goes around 6,000 to 7,000 rupees, which we have brought down through account aggregator to less than 100 rupees. What I am telling you, one round of verification, when it cost around 6,000 to 7,000, and when you are 12 months verification, it is being done within less than 100 rupees. It's quite a saving of public funds, as well as removing the administrative drudgery and utilization of account aggregator framework. Now, coming back to, this is one scheme where we are using. So there are multiple government welfare schemes which are being implemented either directly or by third party, where this thing of DBT, direct benefit transfer, is not there. Now it becomes a challenge, and there are a lot of porous measures where through which people deceive the officers and the officials which are involved in the implementation of program. So to make it a more leakage-proof program, if this can't be implemented, I'm just giving another example of another institution. That's a financial institution again, but there a lot of fundings are going to the non-government sectors, NGOs. So they provide certain funds to NGOs, and in turn that there is certain enterprise trainings or other skilling initiatives are taken up by that third-party agencies. Now, again, they go for the placements and verifications. So to check the rampant misuse of data fuzzing or creation of documents, this needs to be controlled and checked. And nothing can be better than when the bankers are putting their own data under account aggregator framework to be used, processed, and checked, and given in a real-time measure that whether this account. So what data we give in the account aggregator framework is that Vinay Kumar Pandey's salary has been credited on this date at this time. So 2-3 dates the range has been given, and based on that the checks are done and then it's given. So when we see the potential of taking it up, this has a potential to take it up across where stipends are being paid, where incentives are being paid, where NGOs are being funded for either self-help group or other entities through which we are going to transact with certain operations with bank, and bank deliveries are there, payments are there. So these are the cases where when you talk about that, what are the opportunity and threats for the hackers group to delve into this? So there are a lot of issues specifically coming with the salary slips and offer letters, where the documentation is there and documentation is edited one. So how to find out at the instance of entry level that this document which is being uploaded is dubious, so that we can create a matrix under which the kind of flow of that document in the system is under suspected category, and we, instead of going for all round 100% verification of details, we can focus on a certain pocket of where the suspect cases are there. So the administrative drudgery removes, and this will not only help the public funds misuse, but as this will help more generation of livelihoods, because the funds which are saved is going to be implemented for the program delivery. So that will be a very great point and great assistance, which has we had seen this and we had tested with framework where we are doing a mobile-based identification of the bank accounts. And in the next stage, we are going through the Aadhaar ID-based identification of the bank accounts. And that will be tagged with the candidates and it will be verified. So this measure has a lot of potential to saving government revenues, public fund misuse, as well as ensuring transparency and public disclosure. So I would like to rest with my case with this and potential. I said that we are the first, and this is the novel initiative which was supported by Samati. And if taken up in a grand level, I think it will go to all states, all districts, and they can use, and this will be saving lot of, and it is an environment impact also. The lot of paper things, as well as the documentation process which is taking place will be saved through these measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinay sir. That was a wonderful overview of how we can really change welfare scheme delivery in India. I would like to turn to Riju Ray, who is the CBO at ID5, and start with his overview.
Thanks, Rutfit. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Riju. I'm the Chief Business Officer of ID5. Firstly, thanks for having me here to the Samati group. I know there's a lot of people who are participating in the hackathon here, lots of young people. And I'm hopeful that I can say something inspirational that will make you use the account aggregator more and more. That is what I consider my mission today. Let me start by explaining what ID5 is. Then I'll talk about account aggregator, what it means to us. So what we do at ID5 is actually very simple. We try to eliminate fraud and establish trust. And so this means we have a very deep relationship with data, both personal and impersonal. Radha, just leave the room. Leave the room just now. Sorry about that. So we have a very deep relationship with data, both personal and impersonal. And our job is often to understand this data and help our customers decide if something is true. Right? So this way, what we try to do is we unlock opportunities for lots of people. On a daily basis, we verify about 2 million users. And we do this for banks like HDFC Bank, for payment players like PhonePe. We work with e-com companies like Amazon, lenders like Bajaj Finserv. And our work here is to identify and onboard the new users. We try and also underwrite the risk of them depending upon the context. And we also, in fact, manage access and the consent that is provided for the personal data as well, as per the DPDP Act, which has just been enacted and the rules are awaited. So these are the three sort of main things we do. Now, jumping straight into the question for today, which is account aggregator and the data and what it means to us really. So what I think about data is, and I like to, the good analogy for this is probably archaeology to me. If I think about data that we get from the bank statement, it's a bit like digging for relics from the distant past. So as you dig deeper into different layers, you discover more and more information about a person or a company when you go through this information that's provided in account aggregators. For example, a simple examination of the bank statement might tell you a bit about a person or a company's bank balance. But if you dig a little bit deeper, for a company, you might even know what their revenues are. You might understand how many employees they have. You may know who their suppliers are. You could also know who their customers are. And so you start getting a very nice picture about the company. And when you have this picture, you can start correlating with other information, such as information that is provided from, say, the tax sources that you have, or what the person or the company is actually claiming. So as you get this information, what it really does is it allows you to establish trust. You are able to trust this person. And as Vinayji just spoke about, he's able to probably make his various government schemes work because he can trust the other party on the other side, right? Consider India as a country that is extremely sophisticated when it comes to fraud. There are so many ways that people try to defraud. The very basic way that they do is, in fact, they forge bank statements. Something Vinayji alluded to. But if you go a level deeper, they actually make fake companies as well. So inside the fake companies, they may have fake employees who may have fake salaries. And then you might have fake salaries coming in bank statements who are completely legitimate. So unless you actually dig deeper, the source, the truth may not really be, apparent to you. It will still be a case where the fraudster has found a way through this maze. So these patterns that I'm alluding to, they are very crucial to address questions of fraud and to address questions of risk to us. Now, coming to the way we look at this information and the use cases we see, which are not financial, which is the topic for today, right? So beyond the financial services use cases, which are so apparent to us, because it's just the lifeblood of lending today. When it comes to understanding how much loan you can give to somebody, we automatically look at their bank statements to see what is their ability to pay. But beyond this, there are so many other ways that we find it useful. One of the basic things is the validation of the vendors or the companies you work with. And also the validation of, say, sensitive individuals who you work with, right? Look at the first instance, every supplier you interact with, every customer you want to work with that you basically think is going to pay you back according to the payment terms, you may be running a financial risk. And so it's important to understand when you do business with somebody, based upon the amount of business, that you de-risk yourself. You find this very heavily utilized. It's actually apparent in every industry that we need to have this kind of a service to understand the risk of dealing with the third parties, right? When it comes to information that is, when it comes to sensitive roles, let's take the example of Vinayji again. I'm sorry to go deeper into your example, but let's say Vinayji had the task of reaching out to villages. Now, if you know India, it's not like the smartphone is used by everybody for financial transactions. It's actually a case where there's a lot of reliance on smartphones for WhatsApp. Maybe there's some payments that are happening already. But a vast amount of this is actually done through business correspondents and through people who are often called as banking correspondents. They will be at the villages and they will be often small shops that you would reach out to and you would use that for remittance use cases, right? Such people are actually dealing with lots of cash, lots of money, right? And if you do not take your precautions when you work with them, you will again get into some sort of risk or issue. So therefore, understanding these people and verifying these sensitive users is also very important. Then it comes to other aspects of your life. So imagine that you are somebody who has a property that you want to let out, or if it's a situation where you're thinking of selling your property, you will often think about the other side and whether they have the ability to pay you or not. Suppose a company is your tenant and then they take the property from you and they start using it and they stop paying rent. What recourse do you have? You might be stuck with it for a while to get legal action done in India, right? Not many states have great tenancy laws. So you might actually be stuck with a poor tenant for a fairly long time. So doing that kind of work is actually very, very apparent use case there. Then there are interesting use cases in insurance. You might argue insurance is a financial services use case again, but it is a very, very big issue today, as Vinayji was saying, that a lot of fraud happens when it comes to people claiming health insurance, right? You'll say, I am an employee of this company and I deserve this insurance. And then fake companies are created and then insurance is obtained in that manner, right? We see this as a big example. So there are all of these different places that we find this coming in useful. I think the the way we look at this is, if there's a problem of finding out fraud, or if it's a problem of finding out risk in a certain transaction between people or between companies, it's an extremely important tool that we have at our disposal. That's all I have.
Wonderful. I think a lot of interesting questions I've already noted down. I'll wait for others to finish the opening remarks and then I'll direct those questions to all the panelists. I would like to bring our attention to Mrs. Prafula Agarwal, who is building a very interesting use cases on sustainability and tokenization. Over to you, Prafula.
Thanks, Rutvik. I think I'll just continuing from where Riju said, I think this whole conversation seems to have the same thread. I made a note, I said it finishes my summation saying, what do? We eliminate fraud and we establish trust. Okay. The only thing we do is we pivot it on sustainability, which means around the climate actions. And the reason being climate action is still a very subjective component and discussion, primarily because each of us feel climate very differently. The lower you go into the society on the socioeconomic criteria, the higher the impact on those people. So when there are floods, most of us say, okay, I mean, I live in Bangalore, so whoever is here or other cities, I think everybody is facing floods. We just sit at home and say we're working from home today. But what happens to the daily wage laborers who can't step out? What happens to a lot of people who are on the ecosystem which services the cities that we live in? Yeah. Hence, I feel that climate action is a very subjective notion, and the impact is felt very differently, and it's also consumed very differently. So people, again, higher in the socioeconomic criteria, they consume climate a lot more than their fair share. And we see that if you look at globally, there are countries which have consumed per capita more climate than countries like India. Just to give a small statistic, while everybody keeps saying India is the third largest emitting country, we are still on a per capita basis, a fraction of what a country on a list of 20 is there. It's just that our scale, our size is bigger, and we still are a very low emitting country. Now, that said, and it's a topic that I'm very passionate, so I'll just keep going on and off for a very long time. But coming back to how the financial data, and how do we correlate it? And I feel that that's right at the fulcrum of this, of any climate action. And I look at it up in two different buckets, one being on the business side and one being on the personal side. So I'll focus first on the business side because the whole voluntary markets, as we call, which is people who are voluntarily taking pledges, making commitments to work on the environment. Here, the very concept of ESG, the fact that while ESG has been around for a while in bits and pieces, that today organizations are compelled to start reporting. I think that's the first step. Why a reporting is important is when you report a financial metric and say, I have made so much of profit. Till in the recent past, it was a balance sheet. I think a lot of chartered accountants or financial professionals would say it's a balance sheet. In liabilities, assets was all about product and services and money. I don't think we ever put social impact and environment impact into that. So to call that, and the day we integrate those impacts into how much have you taken away my environment and what was the cost of it? And you add to that balance sheet, we'll have a very different stock market. Yeah, so it won't be, so we may not find Apple being one of the highest, share prices, or in NVIDIA for that matter, for the amount of data centers they use to provide that kind of technology to us or products. So hence, having a financial data on what is the cost of a climatic impact. And I think now organizations have started measuring it. For example, how many man-days are you losing? It's a straightforward thing. How much of, and this is where we start requiring more technology to integrate it, to say, how is the health of employees, the well-being of the buildings, each of those, my processes that I do. So we are making a very small effort in trying to do that traceability of your footprint of your emissions across the life cycle. So I may say I have brought a lot of us feel very good that I have got electric vehicle. I'm sure if I ask for a vote, a lot of hands will go up. But how much emissions have gone into building that vehicle? Yeah, it's the same as the other vehicle. And then you're saying it's electric because you're using electricity, which is green, but that electricity is being produced by a normal fossil fuels again. So are we really doing something? No, it's moved from a pocket A to pocket B. So unless we don't put a dollar value on each of these transactions in the life cycle, it won't give us a right reflection of what the actual profit and loss balance sheet of an organization would look like. Okay. And ESG reporting, and I think now India also has BSRS reporting. These are mechanisms to start measuring that. So I think India has been, I do feel good about it, that it's been at the forefront of bringing in the CSR, mandatory fund for organizations almost, decade and a half before organizations were even thinking sustainability. Yeah. So bringing the social context into this. The second side of financial data, which I'd like to look at, is the personal side. Because as individuals, we all have a carbon footprint. And the more affluent we are, the more our carbon footprint is. And as a country, as we are growing, and I think not just India, but we have a lot of, I would say 2/3 of the globe still in the lower middle classes to lower than that strata. So all of these are going to go through the motions of growth. Now, and development. Now, the question that comes in is, we can say, yeah, today I realize that if I'm going to drive my limousine, I'm going to add more emissions into the climate. And then somebody turns around and says, yeah, but the Americans did it 50, 100 years ago. Why are you depriving me of it? Yeah. So let me also go through the whole chain of first polluting my part, contributing my pollution, and then I'm going to bring it down. But nobody said the world is a fair place. Okay, we cannot expect homogeneous nature, and which is why we're talking technology, because data is what's going to bring that homogeneity to all actions that we want to do. So I can't use the same template of what it was 50 years ago. We do see, and I don't want to get into controversial discussions, but yes, we have festivals where we use a lot of noise and light. The point is, yes, for the last 20, 50, 100,000 years, we've been doing it. But then we were living in rural places when we did not have lighting. So a festival was the only time when you light up and you create a lot of noise, because you think rural India or rural populations in any country, that's how they were. They were very quiet living places. Today in a city where we have 24/7 noise, which is bombarding us. Now I'm sitting in my home today and I've locked all my windows because Navratri festivals are going down next door. So you get all kinds of noises. Now that's irritating me. Now, the point is my day is fully with noise and sound. So comes the personal choices. Now, what happens as a personal footprint is the misinformation. It's the opacity of that information, and which is where we're using our technology, and I'll explain what we're doing more, is going to open up that, bring the transparency. And when you bring the transparency, you build a trust. Because today, if we're going to just tap in two ways in the personal space, if we're going to tap into just the sheer savings that are sitting in the banks, okay, and the buying behaviors of individuals, which is the data that the banks are sitting on, humongous amount of data today, okay, to be able to customize, your messaging to these individuals, and how do you create a momentum out of it? So I'll give you a small example. Another one, like electric vehicles. We all like to say we carry a cotton bag for shopping. We don't use plastic. Yes, a lot of us do that. But do we know that unless we use that cotton bag 131 times before discarding it, it's more harmful than the plastic bag, a single-use plastic bag? Okay. Now, if we'd say once a week is when we get to go out to do our shopping, and so you're talking about 52 weeks, and you have to use it 131 times. So 2.5 to 3 years, you got to use the bag. 2.5 years, you are at an equal level as a single-use plastic. And beyond usage is what you're then helping the earth and the environment and the planet. Yeah. Now, where is this data going to come from? So now, and this dissemination of data around the climate impact and the footprints to individuals, and marrying these behaviors, knowing what kind of a financial footprint you are detailing in your day-to-day lives. We feel good. Yeah, I've put up a solar in my house, rooftop. I'm now on renewable energy. Great. I post it all over social media. I save money. I take that and I fly off to Goa for a holiday. What does that mean? So we can't stop people from doing what they want to do. But I believe that if we are able to harness that behavioral data from the financial metrics that is resting with large financial institutions, intermediaries, I think we can then structure and tailor right messages, right solutions, and actually unlock a huge potential. Because today, there's a lot of investment required for climate finance. Individually, I know some organizations do saying contribute for a tree there or a plantation here, but you can unlock that investments at scale when you have transparency, traceability, and trust. Okay, and that's exactly what we are doing at Tokri, and we're using blockchain to do that, because blockchain has those inherent qualities of ability to transparently showcase data, at the same time secure that data in a way that only who's relevant can see it. So it's not open like in a public domain. Two, it allows that complete immutability, so nobody can tamper with it. So at least there is no question on the authenticity, and that's how you build trust. And when we're able to build trust in individuals, I think the buying behaviors and the investment behaviors of that financial capital which individuals have will move in the right direction, just like it'll move in the right direction for the businesses. Thank you.
I think that was wonderful. It's a different approach altogether, and sustainability use cases, given the socio-economic context we are in, are very crucial. And I think this opens up a lot of questions and a lot of innovation to happen for that transition to take place. So thank you, Prafulla. I'll move on to Alexander, who is the co-founder at Glyph, and who is it's a non-profit organization who is anchoring these innovations around legal entity identity management and others. So over to you, Alexander. Thank you for having us here.
Well, thank you for inviting me to this event. I would like to first introduce what Glyph is, as we celebrate our 10 years anniversary, as it's pointing out there, to remind the audience of why the Global LEI Foundation was created, for what purpose, and how is that it has evolved over the 10 years to support really all organizational identity needs globally, cross-border. So the Glyph is born from the 2008 financial crisis. So when Lehman Brothers collapsed, banks and regulators had no view on the exposure and the risk that this bankruptcy was creating at global level, because Lehman Brothers was not about one entity, it was hundreds and hundreds of entities all over the world, identified by their national identity scheme, so the business registry ID, but with no global standards identification. So the regulators, the G20 and the FSB, Financial Stability Board, decided to create a system to identify legal entities in the same way, with the same standardized reference data all over the planet, for initially some use cases around OTC derivative reporting, counterparty risk management, but progressively that legal entity identifier evolved into being used as an organizational ID for many, many use cases. So it started in capital markets, still very prominent there, following mandates from regulators. We are overseen still today by 70 regulators from all over the world, including RBI in India. It moved from capital markets to payments, where in India, but also cross-border, there is this requirements to identify payer and payee in transactions using a legal entity identifier, because it helps bring transparency and trust into the system. If you have an LEI, it means that you exist as a company. And if you have an LEI, a legal entity identifiers, it's easier also for players to clearly identify companies, despite the language differences in the description of the company, despite the standards differences in terms of addresses or other reference data related to legal entities all over the world. So capital market to payments, and now it's moving more and more into supply chain management, as well as ESG, to go back to the discussion we were having before about transparency and trust needed in the ESG space. So we are working actively with the International Chamber of Commerce in the supply chain space, but also with all those standards bodies around ESG to see how the legal entity identifier can be leveraged for all type of organizational identity needs. The beauty of it is that it's a non-for-profit, so we're not selling anything. I'm not selling anything in this discussion. I'm promoting a standard that can be leveraged by anybody on the planet for their own needs. So all those legal entity identifiers and reference data associated to it, around 3 million today, are published for free by the Global LEI Foundation and given really to data service providers, banks, anybody really needing to have a global view on legal entities through the LEI system, and also to other data linked to that legal entity. For example, does it has a BIC, bank business identifier code? Does it has ISINs issued under the LEI? What is the S&P corporate ID associated with the LEI? These are all mappings that we've put in place to kind of be a primary key access to other type of data in terms of supporting strong and trusted data architecture within any organizations, really. So that's for the LEI bit. The interesting developments in terms of digital platform is that recently we've created what we call the VLEI, or Verifiable Legal Entity Identifier, which is based on self-sovereign identity and verifiable credential constructs. And what it does is that it enables a company to digitally, verifiably prove their existence on digital platform, whatever the platform, be it a blockchain or a Web2 platform, as we call them, on the internet or cloud-based platform. So it's important that it is independent of the platform, because in our view, organizational identity and credentials should not be a platform play. It should be a protocol play, a standards play. That in order for that protocol and that data standards to be usable on any platform, be it a blockchain platform, and there are many blockchains, so one of those blockchain platforms, or a regular internet or cloud-based platform. So that's why the VLEI has been created as a portable protocol, which means that when you have a VLEI, you can start using it to identify yourself as a company to the regulators for regulatory reporting, for example, like it's happening with the European Banking Authority in Europe. But you can also use it as an authentication mechanism to access the system of your customers or of your providers, for example. You can also use it as a digital signature, linking individuals within that organization to that organization for signing contracts, for signing invoices, to avoid all those invoice fraud, for example, that we're seeing happening on a day-to-day basis. So and I'll conclude there, the objective of the LEI and the VLEI is to bring transparency, standards, and trust in between organizations when they interact with one another, and in a way that I know who you are, the same way that I show your passport, I show you my passport, you know who I am. I know that you are a legitimate person because you have a passport, and I can see it's not a fake passport. So you exist as an individual, and it's effectively you. And then on the digital front, with those verifiable credentials, I can be sure that if I interact with you via email or on our platform or on blockchain, I can be sure that I'm talking to you, UBS or IBM or Amazon whatever company and not to someone impersonating you as a company. And that's very critical as we go into more and more digital platform. And as we know, internet is not secure enough and requires a system that ensures that communications are trusted and that communication are always verifiable in terms of source of the communication. I will pause it there just by concluding that everything I just described is an open data standard. It's based on a non-for-profit public good and is there for use. So feel free to reach out if you're interested to include that into your systems, your new products that you want to develop, and leverage the LEI database. It is accessible via APIs, via downloads, absolutely for free.
Wonderful. I think that's it's a great way to look at how fraud can be managed and trust can be assured in digital economy ecosystems across the world. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the overview, Alexander. I'll just turn the wheels now. I'll start from Alexander to Mr. Vinay.
Actually, could I make a comment on what Alexander said?
Wonderful. I can see you vigorously nodding to what Alexander was saying. So happy to have your comments.
Yeah. So firstly, I'm a big fan of standards. It's an amazing way to solve problems. So I actually come from the telecom world myself. Standards are the way eventually phones from different places and networks from different places can talk to each other. It's far easier to work on standards rather than integrate to everybody. So kudos to you for doing that. It'd be lovely to get access to all of that. So one of the main issues we have is that about 85% of legal entities essentially are not companies. They're like proprietors. And I'll tell you a problem that I faced recently, just so that you understand the situation in India a little bit. So there's this company that you order wines and liquor from in my neighborhood. I live in Bandra. It's called Pinky Wines. And if you call up Pinky Wines, based upon the Google number, you'll find that somebody will pick up the number and say, oh, yes, of course, we'll deliver wine to your place. You can place your order, but if you make the mistake of paying the Pinky Wines, you'll find the wine will never arrive because that wasn't Pinky Wines, it was somebody else. Now, the issue is so deep, especially when it comes to these companies. There is a problem, obviously, of the network, which is Google in this case, where the companies are allowed to register themselves.
Yes.
There's an element of account takeover.
Absolutely.
The element of trusting whether Pinky Wines is the right Pinky Wines or not. There's the issue of if this person who is claiming to be from Pinky Wines is actually from Pinky Wines or not. There's like a whole cascade of issues.
Absolutely.
And this is, I think, a hallmark of a low trust economy. I think we have the same issue in Philippines and Indonesia, other countries I work in. Basically, you're working with a lot of these entities that are not companies. And I wish we could also get into some standards here to solve that problem. And in a way, I think Account Aggregator could actually help here as well.
It's a good point. And by the way, the LEI, the legal entity identifier, is for any business that is registered. Obviously, you should never buy, in my view, any products from a company that is not registered. That's my view, even if it's a small company. Just to give you an example on the LEI front, I have a very, very small company, one person, which is me, sole proprietorship in France to run an Airbnb. That's all it is used for. I have an LEI. It was easy to get because I want to be able to demonstrate globally to a tourist in Switzerland that they can rent and pay me whatever amount for my Airbnb without risking of losing their money because I exist as a legal entity. And it doesn't have to be big legal entities. It's just a legal entity structure, sole proprietorship, one-person business. It works. So I think it's a question of regulators mandating the registration of companies, whatever the size, to ensure that there is a way to secure those transactions and use a verifiable credential system on the internet or on Google, for example, to ensure that it's verifiably existing, a verifiably existing company.
Amazing. I think one question popped in my head, and this is actually for Prafulla. So we have gone through a discussion from welfare policies, how they can be implemented and monitored, to supply chain management, and how trust can be assured in all the ways companies interact with other companies. So in terms of sustainability, and when more and more when India would move towards more sustainable actions, you mentioned few policies that are already enacted, but when more direct, more uh, in a way, if you can say, policies that uh, want companies to move towards sustainable practices, then come into the picture. How do you think will mapping financial data, the carbon footprints, their legal identities, who do they deal with, all of this come into the picture, and when at the crux of sustainable transition? How do you envision this? How do you look at this?
Okay, so in an ideal world, and I think somewhere the governments will have to align into that, because right now we're still saying that we are growing. We don't want to, we want to lift our people into a more matured economy before we start getting more preemptive and taxative, let's put it that way, like what Europe is doing, for example. So one way of making businesses be conscious about it is start putting a value and a price to the climate you're consuming. Today, we don't treat climate as a commodity, and I think its time has come to treat it, especially when we apply for the commercial valuation of that. So yes, if you are a mining company, sure, we're not asking you to stop working, stop mining, or if you're a chemical manufacturer, by all means, go ahead and do your business. But then you're also consuming the environment. You're consuming water, you're consuming land, you're consuming air. So compensate for it. Okay. So today they hire people. Organizations pay people. Yes, they hire labor, they hire workforce, they hire senior managers, management, leaderships. They pay for people because they treat people as a commodity to run their business. They pay for machinery. Okay. They pay for utilities. We're saying pay for environment. Translate the emissions into those categories and do. And the government is across the world, and even in India, I think they have started doing it rather, and but on certain limited sectors which are seen as high polluting sectors, which could be a steel, cement, fertilizers, electronics. So some sectors where they've created a concept of a carbon credit, saying they've created threshold. Then to manufacture a steel, you can only emit an X amount of carbon into the environment. If you do more than that, you pay me for it. Okay. So EU has brought that in. They used to work under a different law called ETS. Now they brought in the CBAM. A lot of confusion all around the world. Consultants make good money in all of these things. But the fact is that each region, each country is coming up with its own set of rules. So India has these rules, and on certain segments, it is mandatory. So if you take some of the PSUs, there's an obligation on them. So all our electricity discoms, which provide our electricity to us, which are the distributors, they all have mandatory obligations. So they have to show about 17% of the volume they transact should come from a renewable energy. Okay. Then there are textile exporters. So textiles is another large one which comes under the obligatory one, where they have to, if they're unable to reduce their emissions, they have to buy offsets, which means they will have somebody else has created an environment positive activity. So you buy from them and bring it here. So those activities are happening. Underlining point is translate environment into a commodity and put a price to it. So it becomes part of your P&L. So then you start looking at it. People say cost cutting. When they say I'm going to work with lesser people, lesser material, we say I'll work with lesser environment. So I think that's the way forward.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I would definitely say it's difficult, but I wouldn't say it's impossible. So we have to work towards it. This is what I take away from this. I'll ask a question to Alexander, keeping in mind that he has a very hard deadline at 7. I want to ask you a question on point you raised about how verifiable legal identity you have been incorporating and fostering at Glyph. How do you also look at using the maybe tokenized version of financial data, maybe a global standard of those, and how that financial data can also be used at building more trust in interactions between different companies, different individuals, and creating a more trustable environment in the digital economy. Alexander, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. On the tokenization front or financial tokenization front, this is my background. Before joining Glyph, I used to work for the SIX Digital Exchange in Switzerland and for blockchain companies. The benefit of organizational identity, well, the challenge with tokenization in general and blockchain in general is that there is no standard for identification of who is behind the data, who is behind the wallet, who is behind even a smart contract. So the issuer of a token, for example, based on smart contract, we don't know whether it's effectively the right issuer or if it's someone pretending to be the issuer. And we have had cases, especially on public chain, where these type of issues happen. So what we are, where we envision the LEI and the VLEI specifically, is in effectively making those smart contract issuers being either a service or a token verifiable through the VLEI system. So we are in discussion with companies like, for example, Chainlink or Layer Zero, who are integrating into multiple chains to see how they could leverage that regulatory supported organizational identity and verifiable credential system as a way to verifiably identify token issuers and counterparties to a transaction on a blockchain. So and the source of data, any data really that is flowing on a blockchain or in a tokenized form or not. So that's where we're working on. It's obviously the beginning, because most of those blockchains have built their own DID and verifiable credential systems, believing that it will be their killer app when it's not going to be, because if I'm on Ethereum, it doesn't work on Solana. If I'm on Solana, it doesn't work on R through Corda. And if I'm on R through Corda, it doesn't work on whatever. So interoperability does not exist. So that's why you need to have a protocol layer about organization ID and credential that can be plugged into whatever platform. The same way that with my Apple ID on my iPhone, I can connect to multiple applications without having to recreate a new password and log in every single time.
Wonderful. I'll just take your concluding thoughts before going to everyone else, because then we might miss you. So maybe what do you expect participants to build? What would you like participants to build on in this hackathon?
It's still me, right?
Yeah, still you. A very short answer, not a long one.
Anything really that leverages the amazing amount of data that is available for free in the LEI database. So I invite them to have a look at the Glyph system. So it's glyph.org. There is an amount of LEI, legal entity identifier, and related reference data that is immense, and including for India, and that they can use to support the build, whatever build they need, and whenever they need to identify an organization in their platform. So that would be my asks, is leverage that identification scheme. It's accessible via APIs, again, for free. It's accessible via download for free. It's really there for use, and no need to reinvent the wheel. The identification scheme is there for your use in whatever platform you want to build, whatever use case you want to build, if you need to identify an organization. And if if there is a credential requirements, of course, that's complicated to do in a few days in a hackathon, but they could look at the VLEI and the way it works in terms of credentials issued to individuals working for that company, and see how that could be leveraged into whatever they're building during the days of work. They will be very active on today and tomorrow and yesterday already, apparently.
Great. Thanks, Alexander. I just want to circulate the same question to everyone in the panel of what do they think of what are the low-hanging fruits, maybe, if not too aspirational, that could be built right now in India and for the globe as well. Using these technological developments around tokenization, sustainability, as well as the real-time access to data through the account aggregator ecosystem. What do you envision? What could be these products to build? Mr. Vinay, please go ahead.
See, first of all, I would like to thank Rizu and Alexander on this account. The trust deficit basically, and to providing for the public funded programs, the trust which government requires. It requires the first thing which I would like hackathons to try, that data. There are a lot of data for self-employment candidates where they have gone for self-employment, but identifying that what is their income level, whether it has increased, whether it is decreased. So some sort of tool is not there, and right now the most incomprehensible estimates are there only, and you cannot estimate clearly a person's income. And that too, when they are not coming from the organized sector per se, which Alexander was intending to, because there are different layers of rules which defines different type of legal entities also, starting from SHGs to their block federation, to then going to the Shops and Establishment Act, then going for MSMEs and companies, limited liability partners, public funded companies. So there are different entities. Now question is there, if somebody starts an enterprise, and what are the kind of data sets which you can use from the financial world, and to estimate a little bit of rough estimates going around 70% plus kind of importance value, that this person is earning this kind of, so he is moving away from the poverty cycle and moving ahead. Second data set which was highlighted by Prafulla, but I would use in a different context. All the bankers across world are sitting on a huge stockpile of data, specifically related to funding of all the enterprises. So if you ask a best AI-driven DPR to be made of detailed project report for any sector, for any enterprise, for any product, somewhere down the line in some bank, that DPR must be there. So if it can be machine learned and analyzed and prototype can be made, it will help not only the first world countries, but second world, third world, and all developing countries to have a graduating approach from going for a small level of enterprise than to. I have a little bit of concern on the ESG side, because a lot of things are said on ESG, but implementation challenges are also huge. We have around 70 crore plus school kids in the school. If I have to remove the curriculum and in the paper-based format, and you have to assess the kind of paper felling or tree felling is required for those paper making, the kind of there will be no chances. Even coming to the electric vehicle segment, Prafulla has highlighted only one aspect of that. When you are making the electric vehicles, what about the batteries which are being made? From where these are being mined? How these people, how they are being paid? Are the human resources are well compensated? Forget about ESG and environment compensation. Whether the staff which is being used for mines and how you are going to maintain the batteries after 6 or 7 years. So there are a lot of challenges in all segments of ESG, but nevertheless, we should be environmentally conscious, but we should not be, shirking the responsibility of our poor brethren where they need to be supported. So who sets the standards is a very big question. Most of the time, it is the Westerners which sets the standards, and normally Easterns people follow it. So somewhere down the line, we have to bring a sanity that everybody accepts those kind of standards, even for legal entities. That if say UN recognizes all this kind of entities and everybody can go through a kind of ISO platforms. So there is a single blockchain developed platform which deals with all legal entity, then it will be easy, yes. But I would like the hackers to help us in the finalizing of how to reassess or correctly assess the income levels, combing the data sets which are provided by individual banks. or for the bank, account holders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that opens a different avenue altogether of what can be built and what can be thought of. I'll quickly go back to Riju on what he has to say on what he expects the hackers to build on.
I mean, Vinayji is such a hard act to follow, simply because when he says something, it's about poverty alleviation and taking millions out of poverty. I mean, how can you beat that, right? So he's a very difficult man to follow, and I really appreciate the fact that the government is thinking about technology and data in the context of trying to do it in the right way. And it's such a different government from what it used to be, right? Imagine being able to look at this information that's out there and being able to use it in the right way. It's really quite amazing. With that said, let me tell you a little bit about the part that I struggle. Look, it's easy to look at a statement that's submitted by somebody and to go down the layers. Maybe there is more intelligence and analysis you could put into it and figure out fraud and risk. Where I struggle with personally is to understand opportunities, right? And so if you just think about the reverse of what we've been saying, there is a common man. He has a certain bank account and he's got some income. Now he's eligible for a few things. Whatever he's eligible for, it could be something from the government. It could be some, things which are not from the government, but private sector. Maybe these are loans he could get, or maybe these are various goods or services that he is eligible for, but he's not aware of it. It's about building that persona based upon information that's available and figuring out opportunities so that you can reach out to them with these opportunities rather than them applying for it. Because that's another big issue, right? How do you reach out to all the people? It's so hard. If you are able to cut through the clutter and find the right people for the right things, you could probably really add some value. So I think I'm sure there are a lot of smart people out there in the hackathon. If you are inspired by this challenge, if you could find ways to empower these people by providing opportunities to them, I would welcome you to try.
I think that's a great point of how maybe the power of networks and the power of data can be combined together for institutions to reach customers rather than the other way around.
Just to supplement what Rizu said,
Absolutely.
when I was presenting this last year in Sahamati, our model of this, there was also a model which was presented there, and I gave them a challenge. I again reiterating that challenge. We have around 10 crore rural self-help groups. So 10 crore families are involved in this self-help group activity. Now all these families have certain bank accounts, but are they having access to credit at all levels? No. So if the data can be used from the banking channels through account aggregator platform to customize the credit services need to service that, specifically coming for the Kharif season or Rabi season for agriculture or some small scale non-farm enterprises, there is a huge potential and the NPA rates are one of the lowest in this sector. So if data can be used properly and a model can be established, so you can imagine the kind of emancipation or empowerment of rural women folk you are looking at. So I'm not talking about lakhs and millions, it's more than 10 crores. So that is the kind of gambit we have. Over to you.
I think that's just the opportunity waiting to be unlocked. Maybe someone in the hackathon can just build on it. Years down the line might have a successful company. And the next hackathon, they might be the panel speakers. So Praful, I have one just question to you, and maybe then you can deliver your concluding thoughts. So we went through a couple of very interesting thoughts on Riju said about how personas can be built and how those can be leveraged to provide credit, how Mr. Vinay pointed out. I just want to contextualize this in terms of sustainability and carbon credits and their carbon footprints. We in the AI ecosystem generally talk about how the ecosystem and create a personal balance sheet for every individual. How do you think you or companies similar to working on the sustainability space can create a personal carbon footprint for customers using their financial data, and how that can be leveraged to nudge them towards better practices, better choices?
Thanks. I think it sort of also dovetails into what I wanted to circle back on the other point. Maybe I'll do that and I'll come back and close your question. So I think I'm in a complete consent with both Vinay and Rishu around saying that there is this data. And I think if my ask is the same, that for the amount of financial behavior data that is sitting with our banks, if we have a tool or an intelligent tool which is going to give us the trends, and more importantly, not broad base it, but sort of be able to customize then opportunities for individuals. I look at this also from a very selfish thought process of saying, how do we enable wealth creation for a large part of the population that sits under the middle classes? And when I say middle classes, I'm talking about both the lower and the upper middle classes. Because this is an aspirational class. Two, this is a class which is also largely impacted by the climate changes. And this is a class that is hungry to grow and invest beyond, their day-to-day lives. And with the kind of what do you call the economic growth that we are seeing in the country, there is disposable incomes today. And using this data, leveraging it to say that, hey, listen, sort of personalized messaging that goes into say, you've spent X amount of this going into, let's say, you drove down by the hills and went into Coorg, but maybe there was something close by. You didn't have to do that part of it, or you didn't have to travel from Mumbai all the way into Ooty. You could have done Lonavala. So, but before you do that, you are updating them with information saying every action they take translates into so much carbon footprint. Okay. And that data is what's available. So here you're bringing in a data from the climate impact of every behavior that you do and marrying it to the financial impact to say that when you do this, this is what's happening. So you have a positive connotation, and you also have to build a negative connotation to say, if you did 5 trips less last year on your holidays, that emission which should have reduced could have led to one reduced rainfall over the last weekend, which drowned everybody. Yeah. Now that's the propensity of data to play around, and that's so much of intelligence that can be built in. So you're creating those, it's like your simple thing, like your traffic signals. When it's green, you go. When it's red, you stop.
Right.
So how are we going to treat that financial data to say green behavior, red behavior? So that part of it. And that, I think, sort of dovetails into your question saying, how do you establish that carbon footprint? So yes, we have done a fair amount of research over the last so many years and built a certain amount of data repository, but broad basing this and intelligently repurposing it is still a long way off, because individual carbon footprints are still very fashionable. And as I said, there's a lot of misinformation. Mm-hmm. And having that kind of tools which will tell us readily. Today we have, for example, in the food, we say you eat, a plate of jalebis and it's going to be so many calories. So we're saying put the calorie boards, you eat a burger, there's a calories. We need to have similar charts available predominantly everywhere to say, when you're taking your car out, when you're taking a bus out, when you're using public transport, you want to think you're doing good by carrying a cotton bag, but we use it for what, 2 months? And then we say, I want a new cotton bag. You're not helping the environment at all. Okay. So awareness. So use environment data, the impact of your actions, dovetail it into the financial behaviors. So you do customized campaigns so that you understand. No point doing broad-based campaigns because they will go over my head.
Can I ask a question to Prafulla?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
I thought it's a lovely, I almost imagined when you said it, that there is a bank statement and next to it, there is this carbon statement, which is a translation of the same bank statement. But
Yes.
now it tells you how much credits you used on the carbon side, and look, you were this inefficient. In a way, it could make you feel guilty as well for what you do. So the point, of course, is that I would obviously react to it, and I would care deeply about changing my behavior accordingly. And I don't want to prejudge people. I feel like not everybody would react the same way. So how do you nudge people towards it? One part is, of course, campaigns, but are there other ways you might nudge? What are your thoughts on it, Prafulla?
So there are 3-4 ways to do this. One is there will always be those enthusiasts who will say, hey, I'm leading the whole pack. I want to do it. They're doing it they love to post it on their social media campaigns and you kind of saying, I'm living a net zero lifestyle and all of that. So it's a personal, aspiration that you do. The second way of doing this is create a monetary benefit to it. Okay. So you have, and we have examples, like I think there are some states in the United States, in USA, which give tax benefits to people who are able to prove that they have taken climate positive behaviors and changed their lifestyles to do that. Okay. I think these two are the primary ones that you do. And 3, most people ignore it because you are not creating what do you call, an interest in that. It's a subject which is very boring at the end of the day. Now, the reason we called ourselves Tokri is at some point we want to go more retail and say, ki aapki Tokri kitni hari hai? So I think we want to, next Diwali, we will start with the next festive season, launch a campaign. So if it's a birthday, please don't send chocolates and mithais. If it's Diwali, don't give gifts. Please give people an investment in a nature-based project. Say on your behalf, I have put in 5% into this 20 trees, or this 2 trees. I'm doing it with, say, a Sadhguru's thing or some other people, or there's a forest which is got a massive forest. Maybe I've taken 0.5% on your name. I have invested. I'm giving you an investment certificate. Okay. So to change behavior. So you've got to drive that, and that's what we are aiming to do in the next 12 months. We want to get into the retail space where we create those campaigns. I think that's the only way to get people to start recognizing.
Thank you.
I think that's mind-blowing. And just reflecting back on the whole conversation that we've had in the past 1 hour, I think we have traversed a different spectrum altogether, going from welfare schemes to sustainable action to identity management to trust, and how at the end, how the individual is at the center of everything, and how data can be leveraged by these individuals to create better lifestyles, better habits, and better. Sure, Prabha, go ahead.
Yeah, but one just last point which I missed out is create investment opportunities. So there are a lot of nature-based projects, and when you create the trust and transparency, they start becoming fractional owners into it. And I think that's one of the reasons also where we picked on blockchains, where tomorrow you can own maybe a quarter piece or a quarter acre in an Amazon forest, or in our own Western Ghats or Eastern Ghats, and contributing to the sustenance of those. And the credits that you earn are investments for you.
Wonderful. I think that's a good note to close actually on. I can't do justice anything beyond these words. So I think thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Vinay, thank you, Riju, thank you, Prafulla. Thank you so much for joining in. It's been wonderful hosting you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.